How does a commander win when completely surrounded, outnumbered 5-1, and facing enemies from both sides? This impossible situation would have crushed lesser generals, but for Julius Caesar at Alesia in 52 BCE, it became his defining moment of genius. The fate of Rome's northern frontier hung in the balance. After 6 years of brutal conquest, Caesar had subjugated most of Gaul, but now faced a desperate crisis. A charismatic Gallic chieftain named Vercingetorix had achieved what Roman strategists thought impossible, uniting the perpetually feuding Celtic tribes into a massive coalition. For the first time, the disparate Gallic peoples set aside ancient rivalries to face an existential threat: Roman domination. Consider the stakes for both commanders. For Caesar, failure at Alesia meant more than military defeat. His political career would collapse under crushing debts accrued financing this war. His enemies in Rome, men like Cato and Pompey, actively worked to strip him of command. The Senate had already debated recalling him to face trial for exceeding his authority. Every victory in Gaul wasn't just military conquest, it was political survival. For Vercingetorix, the situation was equally dire. Born to nobility among the Arverni tribe, he had witnessed Roman expansion transform from trading partnership to outright conquest. When his own father was executed for aspiring to kingship, Vercingetorix learned the bitter lesson that cooperation with Rome inevitably led to subjugation. Reports from conquered territories told of horrific reprisals against resistance, entire populations enslaved, tribal lands confiscated, crushing taxation imposed. The tactical situation Caesar faced would have terrified any conventional commander. Vercingetorix had barricaded himself with 8,000 warriors inside the hilltop fortress of Alesia. Intelligence reports confirmed a massive relief force approaching perhaps 25,000 warriors from tribes across Gaul. Caesar's 42,000 legionaries would soon be caught between the fortress and this relief army. Why not retreat? Military logic dictated withdrawal to more favorable ground. Instead, Caesar made the extraordinary decision that military academies still study today. He would build not one but two massive rings of fortifications. The inner ring would contain Vercingetorix's forces, while the outer would defend against the approaching army. In essence, Caesar deliberately trapped his own forces between two hostile armies that collectively outnumbered him nearly 8-1. Archaeological evidence confirms the scale of this engineering marvel. Excavations begun under Napoleon III uncovered precisely the fortifications Caesar described in his commentaries: 18 kilometers of walls, towers, and ditches constructed in just weeks under constant threat of attack. Consider what you might accomplish with 4,000 men when their survival depends on their labor. The human drama unfolding alongside these tactical maneuvers was equally intense. Inside Alesia, food supplies dwindled rapidly. Vercingetorix faced an impossible decision: keep non-combatants inside and accelerate starvation, or expel women and children into the no-man's land between the fortress and Roman lines. Caesar, understanding psychological warfare, refused these civilians passage. The suffering that followed would haunt both commanders. Unknown to the Gauls, Caesar's own position was equally precarious. His supply lines stretched thin, his men exhausted from constant construction and vigilance. Among his officers, whispers of doubt grew. Had their brilliant commander finally overreached? Were they digging their own graves? As autumn rains muddied the ground and chilled the air, both sides prepared for the coming confrontation. Caesar positioned his most trusted lieutenants, Mark Antony, Titus Labienus, Gaius Trebonius, at critical sectors. Vercingetorix coordinated signals with the approaching relief force. The stage was set for one of history's most dramatic sieges. What followed would transform the map of Europe forever. The civilization, language, and laws that would dominate Western Europe for centuries hung in the balance. And the desperate gamble Caesar was about to undertake would either cement his place among history's greatest commanders or destroy him completely. What made Rome's legions so devastatingly effective that they could conquer territories from Scotland to Syria, from Portugal to Persia? The answer lies not merely in Roman weapons or tactics, but in something far more fundamental: organizational genius. When Caesar faced the Gallic coalition at Alesia, he wielded what military historians consider the ancient world's first truly professional army. Unlike the tribal warriors they faced, however, Brave or numerous Roman legionaries operated as components in a sophisticated military system refined through centuries of constant warfare. Each Roman legion contained approximately 5,000 men divided into 10 cohorts. These cohorts, the primary tactical units, further broke down into 6 centuries of roughly 80 men each, commanded by centurions. These centurions weren't aristocratic officers, but battle-hardened veterans promoted through merit and experience. A centurion carried a distinctive transverse crest on his helmet and a vine staff used to maintain discipline. As one captured Gallic chieftain reportedly observed, a Roman army with sheep for soldiers led by a lion would be more fearsome than an army of lions led by a sheep. The standardization of Roman equipment gave their formations unparalleled flexibility. Each legionary carried the same arms. The gladius hispanicus, a 20-inch stabbing sword devastating in close combat. The scudum, a curved rectangular shield that could be locked together in formation. And 2 specialized javelins designed to bend upon impact, rendering enemy shields useless as the shaft could not be removed easily. Training created remarkable unit cohesion. New recruits underwent months of conditioning before ever seeing battle. They marched 20 miles daily carrying the equipment weighing 60 pounds. They practiced formation changes until they could execute maneuvers automatically amid the chaos of combat. Most critically, they drilled in the disciplined rotation system that gave Roman infantry its stamina advantage. Front-rank soldiers would fight briefly, then step back to be replaced by fresh troops from the ranks behind. Consider what you would face as a Gallic warrior charging a Roman line. Your initial fury might drive Romans back momentarily, but while you tire, they systematically rotate fresh soldiers forward. Your individual courage means little against this relentless machine. The psychological dimension of Roman military effectiveness cannot be overstated. Legionaries knew their formation protected them. They understood that maintaining discipline meant survival. This created a paradoxical courage, not the frenzied bravery of barbarian warriors, but the steady resolve of men who trust their training, their equipment, and their comrades. At Alesia, this organizational superiority would prove decisive. With limited manpower stretched across 18 kilometers of fortifications, Caesar could rapidly redeploy reserves to threatened sectors. When Gallic forces breached sections of the wall, cohorts maintained formation even when surrounded, allowing for organized counterattacks rather than disintegrating into individual combat. Roman engineering capabilities further multiplied their effectiveness. While Gallic warriors might match or exceed individual Romans in strength or courage, they couldn't compete with the systematic approach to warfare that allowed Romans to transform landscapes. At Alesia, Caesar's men constructed twin walls 12 feet high with palisades and fighting platforms, ditches 20 feet wide filled with water where possible, 8 rows of anti-personnel obstacles, including lily pads, concealed stakes in pits, and stimuli, barbed spikes embedded in ground. Towers every 80 feet equipped with artillery and signaling capabilities. Carefully designed killing zones where attackers would be channeled into overlapping fields of fire. Archaeological excavations at Alesia have uncovered these defensive works exactly where Caesar described them, confirming his technical accuracy. Recent ground-penetrating radar surveys reveal the engineering precision achieved under battlefield conditions is a testament to Roman military discipline. This system faced its ultimate test when intelligence reports confirmed the approach of the Gallic relief army. Caesar's decision to build a second ring of fortifications facing outward was unprecedented in ancient warfare. No commander had previously attempted to simultaneously besiege one force while defending against another. The 14-mile outer circumvallation included the same defensive features as the inner works, effectively creating a killing ground between 2 concentric fortified positions. The Roman officers understood the strategic gamble. Labienus, Caesar's most trusted lieutenant, reportedly questioned whether stretching their forces so thin invited disaster. Mark Antony argued that abandoning the siege would squander months of effort. Caesar's response reveals his understanding of both tactical necessity and psychological warfare. Retreat now, and we teach the Gauls that Romans can be broken by persistence. Stand firm, and we show them the futility of resistance. This machine-like efficiency of Roman military organization created something more valuable than mere tactical advantage. It generated certainty. While Gallic warriors might match Roman courage and outnumber them significantly, they lacked the organizational framework that transformed individual soldiers into components of an unbeatable system. As the massive Gallic relief force approached from the northwest, this systematic advantage would be tested as never before. Why would a commander deliberately position his army between two hostile forces, each larger than his own? This seemingly suicidal strategy reveals Caesar's profound understanding of both terrain and psychology at Alesia, a battle that would become the textbook example of how superior tactics can overcome overwhelming numbers. The fortress of Alesia occupied Mont Ossois in present-day Burgundy, France, a naturally defensible plateau rising 400 feet above surrounding valleys with steep slopes on three sides. When Vercingetorix retreated here with his 82,000 warriors and civilian population, he believed the position's natural strength would force Caesar to abandon the siege before supplies ran out or relief arrived. Caesar recognized immediately that conventional siege approaches wouldn't work. A direct assault would incur catastrophic casualties. A simple blockade might eventually starve the defenders, but not before the anticipated relief army arrived. He needed a solution that would neutralize both threats simultaneously. His answer was the most ambitious engineering project attempted during the Gallic Wars, the complete encirclement of Alesia with an 11-mile ring of sophisticated fortifications. Construction began immediately, with legionaries working in rotating shifts under armed guard. The primary circumvallation included a V-shaped ditch 20 feet wide and 10 feet deep to prevent sudden sorties, a rampart and palisade 12 feet high with battlements and fighting platforms, regular towers housing artillery and observation posts, forward defenses including wolf, pits, tapering holes with sharpened stakes, stimuli, barbed spikes embedded in the ground, and sipi, tree trunks with sharpened branches resembling antlers. Consider the psychological impact on the besieged Gauls watching this construction. Each day, they witnessed their prison growing more impregnable. Vercingetorix attempted several cavalry sorties to disrupt construction, but disciplined Roman response drove them back each time. As the ring tightened, food stores within Alesia dwindled alarmingly. When intelligence confirmed the approach of the massive Gallic relief army, Caesar faced the decision point that would define his military career. Most commanders would have abandoned the siege to seek more favorable ground. Instead, he ordered the construction of a second 14-mile ring of fortifications facing outward, effectively trapping his own army between the besieged Gauls and their approaching reinforcements. What military logic could justify such apparent madness? Caesar understood that dividing his force to fight on separate battlefields would guarantee defeat. By creating concentric fortification rings, he forced both Gallic armies to attack prepared positions where Roman discipline and engineering would neutralize their numerical advantage. More crucially, he recognized that the relief army, a coalition of different tribes with different leaders, lacked the cohesion to sustain a prolonged siege of their own. Inside Alesia, conditions deteriorated rapidly. With limited supplies and thousands to feed, Vercingetorix made the agonizing decision to expel non-combatants, women, children, and the elderly, expecting Caesar to grant them passage. Caesar refused, forcing these civilians to remain in the no-man's land between the fortress and Roman lines, where they slowly starved within sight of both armies. This ruthless psychological warfare created division among the Gallic leadership, with some arguing for immediate surrender while others insisted relief would come. The first major assault came when Vercingetorix launched a coordinated attack against a vulnerable section of the inner fortifications while sending his cavalry to probe other sectors. Caesar's response demonstrated his command system's effectiveness. He personally led the reserves to reinforce threatened sections, appearing at critical moments to rally his men. The Roman rotation system proved decisive, with fresh troops continuously moving to pressure points while exhausted soldiers withdrew to recover. The arrival of the Gallic relief army, estimated at 25,000 warriors from tribes across Gaul, marked the siege's most dangerous phase. Led by Commius of the Atrebates, this massive force occupied the hills northwest of Alesia, their campfires stretching across the horizon. For Roman sentries maintaining lonely vigils on the outer walls, the sight must have been terrifying. The coordinated assault began the following day. Vercingetorix's forces attacked from inside while the relief army launched multiple assaults on the outer fortifications. Caesar's army now fought on two fronts, the nightmare scenario most commanders would avoid at all costs. The Roman defense system faced its ultimate test. The critical moment came on the second day of these coordinated attacks. Gallic forces identified a weakness in the Roman outer defenses on the northwestern section, where the walls crossed difficult terrain near modern-day Gracigny. Vercingetorix, Vercingetorix's cousin, led 62,000 warriors in a massive assault against this sector, while other contingents attacked different sections to prevent Roman reinforcement. As the outer wall began to buckle under the Gallic onslaught, Caesar faced the most consequential moment of his military career. Reports reached him that both inner and outer fortifications were simultaneously threatened with breakthrough. His response would become legendary in military history. First, he dispatched Labienus with 6 cohorts to reinforce the threatened northwestern sector of the outer fortifications. Then, organizing all available reserves, Caesar personally led a counterattack against the inner breakthrough. Contemporary accounts describe him as removing his distinctive red commander's cloak to avoid becoming a target, but ensuring his troops recognized him by fighting bareheaded among the front ranks. The psychological effect was electric. As word spread that Caesar himself fought alongside them, Roman resistance stiffened remarkably. Centurions, understanding the battle's importance, led by example. The Roman rotation system allowed soldiers to fight in brief, intense bursts before being replaced by fresh troops, while Gallic warriors tired under the continuous exertion. But the true turning point came with Caesar's final gambit. While maintaining pressure on all fronts, the Gauls had left their camp relatively undefended. Caesar dispatched his Germanic cavalry allies who had remained loyal throughout the campaign on a wide flanking maneuver to attack the Gallic camp from behind. When this cavalry force appeared on the hills behind the Gallic position, the psychological effect was devastating. Believing this was another Roman army arriving, panic spread through Gallic ranks. The assault faltered as warriors looked over their shoulders at this new threat. Caesar seized this moment to launch a full counterattack from the outer fortifications. As the relief army's formation dissolved into retreat, Roman cavalry harried their withdrawal, turning defeat into rout. Watching from Alesia's heights, Vercingetorix witnessed his last hope collapse. The battle's outcome wasn't just a Roman victory, it was a complete vindication of Caesar's seemingly impossible strategy. By forcing both Gallic armies to attack prepared positions, he had neutralized their overwhelming numerical advantage. Through psychological warfare, superior organization, and perfectly timed counterattacks, Caesar had achieved what military theorists still study as the perfect example of how to defeat a numerically superior force. What separates history's great commanders from the merely competent? At Alesia, the answer emerged through Caesar's response to near disaster, the moment when both inner and outer fortifications faced simultaneous breakthrough, threatening complete annihilation of his outnumbered forces. As dawn broke on the third day of coordinated Gallic assaults, Caesar positioned himself at a central observation point on the heights of Montreal, providing oversight of the entire battlefield. From this vantage, he witnessed what military theorists would later call the culminating point, that precarious moment when victory and defeat hang in perfect balance. From the Roman perspective, exhaustion had become as dangerous as enemy weapons. Several cohorts had been fighting continuously for over 20 hours, rotating men through the front lines but unable to withdraw completely from threatened sectors. Casualties mounted as skilled Gallic slingers targeted officers. Food reserves dwindled as supply distribution became impossible amid constant attacks. Most concerning, reports arrived of significant breaches in both the inner and outer fortifications. For the Gallic leadership, initial success bred fateful overconfidence. When their forces breached the outer wall near Gracigny, warriors rushed forward individually rather than maintaining formation, each seeking personal glory. This cultural tendency toward individual heroism, so effective in the tribal skirmishes, they were accustomed to prove disastrous against Roman discipline. Rather than consolidating their breakthrough with a coordinated push, Gallic warriors dispersed into smaller groups that could be defeated in detail by Roman reserves. Consider how differently these commanders approached battlefield control. Vercingetorix, from his elevated position in Alesia, could only communicate with his forces through prearranged signals. The relief army leaders, having multiple tribal contingents with separate commanders, struggled to coordinate their assaults effectively. Meanwhile, Caesar maintained a sophisticated messenger system, with horsemen constantly moving between sectors, allowing rapid response to developing threats. The psychological dimension of command became evident when reports reached Caesar that both the inner and outer fortifications faced imminent collapse. His response reveals why a personal leadership mattered so profoundly in ancient warfare. Rather than issuing orders from safety, Caesar gathered his last reserves, including his personal bodyguard, and rode directly to the most threatened sector of the inner fortifications. According to Plutarch, Caesar removed his distinctive red commander's cloak to avoid becoming a target, but rode bareheaded among his troops so they would recognize him. The effect on morale was immediate and profound. Legionaries who had been falling back rallied at the sight of their commander sharing their danger. Centurions, understanding the symbolic importance of this moment, led suicidal countercharges to inspire their men. What would you have done in Caesar's position? With both defensive rings failing simultaneously, evacuation was impossible. No avenue of retreat remained. This existential crisis forced an all-or-nothing response that would either save his army or destroy it completely. While Caesar reinforced the inner fortifications personally, he dispatched his most trusted lieutenant, Labienus, with the last 6 available cohorts to shore up the threatened section of the outer defenses. Labienus, a commander whose abilities rivaled Caesar's own, and who would later become his enemy in the Civil War, understood the desperate situation immediately. Rather than merely plugging the breach, he organized a counterattack to recapture lost ground. Archaeological evidence confirms the intensity of fighting in this sector. Excavations near Gressigny have uncovered dense concentrations of sling bullets, javelins, and broken equipment, material evidence of the desperate struggle that unfolded. Isotope analysis of skeletal remains reveals the multinational composition of both Roman auxiliary troops from Spain and Syria dying alongside Gallic warriors from dozens of tribes. The true turning point came with Caesar's final gambit. While maintaining pressure on all fronts, the Gauls had left their camp relatively undefended. Caesar, recognizing this vulnerability through reports from his observation posts, dispatched his Germanic cavalry of approximately 5,000 riders who had remained loyal throughout the campaign on a wide flanking maneuver to attack the Gallic camp from behind. This decision reveals Caesar's understanding of both tactical opportunity and psychological warfare. Militarily, the maneuver divided his already stretched forces further, creating additional risk. Psychologically, however, it created a visual shock that proved decisive. When this cavalry force appeared on the hills behind the Gallic position, silhouetted against the afternoon sky, the effect was devastating. Warriors who had been pressing the attack glanced backward to see what appeared to be a fresh Roman army threatening their camp and retreat route. Panic, as military theorists from Sun Tzu to Clausewitz have observed, spreads exponentially in battlefield conditions. As the first warriors broke ranks to rush back toward their camp, others followed. Within minutes, the coordinated assault collapsed into a disorganized retreat. Caesar, recognizing the pivotal moment, personally led a full counterattack from the inner fortifications, while Labienus drove forward from the outer walls. For Vercingetorix, watching from Alesia's heights as the relief army disintegrated, the full weight of defeat became clear. His gamble had failed. The relief force retreated in disorder, many warriors slaughtered by Roman cavalry during their flight. Inside Alesia, food supplies were completely exhausted. The tribal leaders who had once passionately supported resistance now argued for surrender. The human dimension of this turning point cannot be overlooked. After weeks of siege, with starvation imminent and hope extinguished, the political dynamics inside Alesia shifted dramatically. Tribal elders reminded Vercingetorix that their primary responsibility was their people's survival. Continuing resistance meant certain death for everyone. Facing this brutal reality, Vercingetorix made the decision that would define his legacy as clearly as victory at Alesia defined Caesar's. Understanding that Caesar would require a high-profile captive to parade through Rome, he offered himself as sacrifice to spare his people further suffering. This act of self-sacrifice transformed him from defeated enemy to enduring symbol of Gallic resistance, a status he maintains in French national consciousness today. The morning after the battle, the Gallic chieftain prepared to surrender with the dignity his position demanded. What followed would become one of history's most dramatic surrenders and the beginning of Gaul's transformation into a cornerstone of the Roman world. How does a single battle reshape an entire civilization? The aftermath of Alesia demonstrates how military victories translate into cultural, linguistic, and political transformations that echo through centuries. The day after the battle, Vercingetorix enacted what would become one of history's most famous surrenders. Donning his finest armor adorned with tribal symbols, he mounted his warhorse and rode alone from Alesia's gates. Contemporary accounts describe him circling Caesar's tribunal once before dismounting, removing his weapons, and kneeling in submission. Caesar, always conscious of symbolic power, ordered him imprisoned rather than executed immediately. 6 years later, after being displayed in Caesar's triumph parade through Rome, Vercingetorix was ritually strangled in the Tullianum prison, standard treatment for defeated enemy leaders. Could Vercingetorix have anticipated how his defeat would transform his homeland? Within a generation, Gallic identity would begin a profound metamorphosis into Gallo-Roman culture. The immediate military consequences were decisive. Organized Gallic resistance effectively collapsed. While isolated pockets continued fighting, the tribal coalition shattered permanently. Caesar spent the next year in mopping up operations against the Bellovaci and other remaining resistors. By 50 BCE, he could truthfully report to Rome that all Gaul was pacified, expanding the Republic's territory by 1/3 and securing its northern frontier along the Rhine. For Caesar personally, Alesia transformed his political position irreversibly. No longer could opponents in Rome dismiss him as an absentee governor fighting barbarians. He now commanded a battle-hardened army of veterans loyal to him personally rather than the state. He controlled vast new territories that provided wealth, resources, and opportunities for client patronage. Most importantly, his military reputation now approached mythic status. This new standing directly precipitated the Roman Civil War. When the Senate, led by Caesar's opponents, ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome to face charges of illegal warfare, his response, crossing the Rubicon River in 49 BCE, was made possible by the loyalty and confidence his army had gained through victories like Alesia. His famous declaration, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast, reflected his understanding that his military successes had made conflict with the established order inevitable. The broader historical consequences extended far beyond military or political concerns. The Roman occupation of Gaul created one of history's most successful cultural fusions. Archaeological evidence reveals how rapidly Romanization followed military conquest. Within a generation, Gallic towns adopted Roman urban planning, architecture, and governance systems. Consider the transformation visible in the archaeological record. Pre-conquest Gallic settlements typically featured defensive structures with irregular internal organization. Post-conquest towns show the distinctive Roman grid pattern with forum, basilica, and temple complexes. Excavations at sites like Lugdunum, modern Lyon, reveal this transition occurred within decades rather than centuries. The linguistic impact proved equally profound. The Latin language spread throughout Gaul, gradually evolving into what would become French. This linguistic transition represents one of history's most successful cultural assimilations. Today, French remains a Romance language descended directly from the Latin introduced following Caesar's conquest. Would you have recognized Gaul just 50 years after Alesia? The transformation would have been astounding. Roman roads crisscrossed territories that previously had only forest tracks. Amphitheaters, bathhouses, and temples dotted landscapes formerly dominated by wooden tribal structures. Gallic nobles, now Roman citizens, sent their children to study rhetoric and law in Roman schools. Recent archaeological discoveries continue enhancing our understanding of this transformation. Excavations across France reveal the fusion of cultures evident in religious practices. Gallo-Roman temples incorporated both Celtic deities and Roman architectural styles, demonstrating not simply conquest but cultural synthesis. Inscriptions show Gallic gods acquiring Roman attributes and Romans adopting local deities into their pantheon. Perhaps most significantly for European history, Caesar's victory established the Rhine as the boundary between Roman and Germanic worlds, a cultural and linguistic frontier that would define European development for centuries. This boundary remains visible on language maps today, with Romance languages predominating west of the Rhine, while Germanic languages dominate to the east. When Napoleon III ordered systematic excavations at Alesia in the 1860s, archaeologists uncovered evidence confirming Caesar's account with remarkable accuracy. The discovery of distinct Roman and Gallic weapons, precisely where Caesar described major fighting, validates his commentaries as one of history's most accurate military records. Recent LiDAR surveys have further enhanced our understanding, revealing previously unidentified sections of Caesar's fortifications and giving us an increasingly precise picture of this pivotal battle. The conquest that began at Alesia would eventually incorporate millions of Gauls into the Roman world, transforming them from enemies into citizens. Within 4 generations, Gallic senators would serve in Rome, Gallic emperors would rule the empire, and the cultural distinction between Roman and Gaul would largely disappear, perhaps the most enduring consequence of Caesar's victory. Why does Alesia still matter 21 centuries later? In this ancient confrontation between determined opponents, we find lessons about leadership, strategy, and the confluence of individual genius with historical forces that remain profoundly relevant today. Military academies worldwide still study Alesia as a masterclass in solving seemingly impossible tactical problems. Caesar's solution, creating concentric fortification rings to fight simultaneously in 2 directions, demonstrated creative thinking that transcends technological change. Modern commanders from Napoleon to Eisenhower have analyzed Caesar's approach to being outnumbered and surrounded, drawing lessons about force multiplication through engineering, terrain exploitation, and psychological warfare. Consider how Caesar's principles apply beyond battlefield contexts. Contemporary business strategists examine his methods for turning disadvantages into advantages, particularly his transformation of the space between fortification rings from vulnerability into opportunity. Corporate leaders study his command structure, delegating sector responsibility to trusted lieutenants while maintaining personal oversight of the entire operation. The psychological dimensions of Caesar's leadership offer equally valuable insights. When a crisis is threatened at multiple points simultaneously, his willingness to personally lead counterattacks demonstrates the force-multiplying effect of visible leadership. Modern studies in organizational behavior confirm what Caesar intuitively understood, that leader behavior under pressure has a disproportionate impact on group performance. Archaeological research continues expanding our understanding of this pivotal moment. Recent excavations using advanced techniques have revealed previously unknown aspects of both Roman and Gallic military technology. Isotope analysis of skeletal remains provides insight into the multinational composition of both armies, showing how Roman forces included Spanish, Syrian, and Germanic troops, while the Gallic coalition incorporated diverse Celtic peoples from across Western Europe. Digital reconstructions based on archaeological findings allow us to visualize the battle with unprecedented accuracy. LiDAR surveys have mapped the full extent of Caesar's fortifications, confirming the remarkable engineering achievement they represent. Ground-penetrating radar has identified mass graves that provide sobering evidence of the human cost of an estimated 4,000 casualties during the weeks of siege and battle. Standing at Alesia today, visitors confront the same topography that shaped Caesar's strategic decisions. The hilltop fortress position, the surrounding valleys where fortifications stood, the approaches used by the relief army all remain visible, allowing direct connection with this pivotal moment in European history. It's impossible not to wonder how differently history might have unfolded had Vercingetorix prevailed. Would a unified Gallic nation have emerged to challenge Rome? Would Germanic tribes have been held at bay without Roman legions defending the Rhine? Would Christianity have spread through Western Europe without Roman roads facilitating missionary movement? The battle for Alesia wasn't merely a clash of armies, but a pivotal moment that determined which cultural, legal, and linguistic framework would shape Western civilization. In those few autumn days of 52 BCE, Europe's future hung in the balance, decided by the strategic vision of Caesar, the desperate courage of Vercingetorix, and the discipline of Roman legionaries who built an engineering marvel while surrounded by enemies determined to destroy them.